A question I hear quite frequently is, how much is my company worth? I'm looking to sell, or hey, I'm looking to buy another MSP. What's that going to cost me? And what does the process look like, and those kinds of things? Well, a few weeks ago, when I was in Atlanta for our peer groups, we had an opportunity to sit down with Reed Warren. Reed is the industry expert as it relates to all things business valuation, M&A, and those kinds of things. And so here's my conversation with Reed. Thanks for coming to peer groups this week, Reed, and it's just been great to have you here. All the members are just jumping up and down and saying how great they thought your presentations were and that they got a lot of value there. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's awesome to be here. Actually, it's been a really fun group. I've loved the interaction with them. People just engaging with it rather than kind of zoning out and falling asleep. And so it's been really a fun conversation all the way around. I've really, really enjoyed it and consider it really an honor to be a part of this. So thank you.
Awesome. And it's funny that you've had to fly all the way to Atlanta to meet with another Minnesota person face to face, right? I have a couple questions for you today, mostly just talking about M&A, because obviously that's where your world is. And so the first question is kind of a general question, but what are you seeing in the world of M&A in the MSP space these days?
Yeah, M&A continues to be really active. Certainly there's still, I would still say it's a seller's market. That said, we see more sellers coming to the market this year than in previous years. And so I anticipate some stabilizing in that, or just balancing. Part of the reason for that is just the last 3 years have been relatively good years for the MSP market. And so a lot of people now have been able to string together 3 years of positive growth. And there's dark clouds on the horizon, which there kind of is every election. So that
sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of nothing new, but everybody kind of gets that agity, kind of like, maybe I should, think about finally selling now. I've got some good things that have happened. And so we see more sellers coming to the market. I think what's going to really help the transactions velocity is really interest rates.
Okay.
Feds has already started to relax those interest rates. It's not going to go back to 22 or with zero, but I think anything from an interest rate perspective really helps your cost of capital and really kind of buoys buyers to be able to do that. The cool thing I think for a lot of like this peer group and a lot of that I'm going to say 5-6 million in revenue is with reduction in interest rates. I can actually borrow more money to actually go do acquisitions.
Oh, sure.
Where when you look at the SBA and you're dealing with 9.5-10% interest rates, that's really hard to go borrow a bunch of money to go do acquisitions. And so with the relaxing of those interest rates, it should help fuel that strategic buyer market, which would be really good.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that kind of that the broader viewpoint, because a lot of times in the peer groups we only hear about like what these individual people are doing, so I appreciate that. Speaking of the individual peer groups, I talk to peer group members left and right, and a lot of them are talking about, hey, I'm thinking about buying this small 1 or 2 person shop, and they're looking to buy a much smaller MSP. So what are some of the things that those types of MSP should be looking for?
Yeah, when you're looking at that sub $2 million kind of market, or particularly sub $1 million market, even for us coming into it, a lot of people are like, hey, can we engage you guys to do this? And it's hard for a couple things. Our fees kind of get in the way of that smaller market. But I think even in that smaller market, all we can say, hey, this is kind of a risky market. It really is very, very dependent upon the individual that's running the operation. And I would just say we've helped a lot of people actually acquire in that space, not because we're directly involved, but we'll kind of coach them from the sidelines. And so one of the places we're able to help, but then also, to answer the question, we're able to come in and do the valuation on that sub, $2 million firm and really help kind of manage everybody's expectation to what's the value of the business, right?
Sure.
And then from there, because a lot of them, most small firms don't have any idea what their value is, and so they heard somewhere they should get an 8x multiple on what they don't know what it is yet. They don't even know how to calculate what that's being multiplied. And so we can come in and actually work through that, and then kind of we laugh about being the unsanta, but kind of being able to deliver the bad news, or here's really where your value is, here's fair market value, and then that really actually positions the buyers to be able to actually pay a premium on it, but it's a reasonable premium that allows them to get to a reasonable rate of return. But I think some of the things what you look for when you actually buy those firms, we have just found if you find a firm that's dealing with high chaos, it's a really problematic acquisition. So even though you can work out the deal financially, what we found is people that are chaotic end up with this a lot of things they didn't know they need to do. They didn't file the taxes in all the right states. So
sure.
We had some others where like, hey, we're in Washington and we haven't paid overtime It's like, oh my gosh,
no.
oh, you got a problem, that's looming. And so that level of kind of chaos, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of swirling along. You end up with finding just a lot of problems within it that you have to deal with later, and it makes it really difficult to be able to flip. That said, you do find a lot of good and I say good companies. It's like, hey, it's actually run by a pretty good engineering guy, is really struggling with growth. But it has great customer satisfaction, has pretty good operational maturity, or at least how to be able to deliver well, is playing by the book, but sort of doesn't know what he doesn't know. And I think in that space, there's some really good acquisitions, or you'll find somebody that's been kind of a lifer. We laugh about it, but seriously, you can go to the same places that we go to. Go to LinkedIn, look for the companies between 1 and 10 people. You can get to the bottom and figure out when they graduated from high school or college, and you
Sure.
go,
Yeah.
I kind of generally know how old they are. And there's a fair number of that $1 to $2 million firm that they've been just in business. It's been a 3-4 man shop, never had aspirations of really growth, and they need to transfer this legacy. And so there's some really good opportunities, I think, there when you're finding somebody that's been at the helm for a long time, runs a pretty stable business. Again, struggling with growth, but wasn't really after growth. They were just really after a kind of a nice paycheck,
Right.
kind of a lifestyle. And so I think there's a lot of good gems that are in there, but we do talk about it. It's like, hey, you got to kiss a lot of frogs to be able to get there. And so all I can say is there's no easy way to find them. You can look at LinkedIn and then just go out and meet them, go out and have a conversation. Share some of the stuff you've learned at your peer group, because most of them aren't in peer groups. And so we had a client that actually did a really good job of that. Was in a different peer group, but he just went to some of his local small companies, said, hey, look, I know you guys can't have the time, but here's some of the things I learned. And he kind of held his own kind of once a month, kind of open forum, sort of, and a bunch of the kind of the smaller companies would come along and just kind of learn lessons from him.
Sure.
And he just did that as a give back. But what that fostered was this relationship with, half a dozen companies that, hey, when the time came for one of them to sell, or, they had some sort of triggering event, it's like, hey, this is a person I already know, I already trust, I would transfer my business. And so when you think about looking to buy, those are some really good give back kind of opportunities. Or if there's services that you have that they don't have, another guy that did VoIP, and he provided just kind of white label VoIP services to a bunch of smaller kind of $1 to $2 million MSPs. And he did about an acquisition a year over about a 6-year journey, grew from 6 million to 12 million.
Wow.
But just by giving back, he, signed a non-compete, didn't take their business, really kind of honored them. But again, got to know them, and he just became the natural go-to when one of them's like, you know what, I'm tired, I've done this too long, I need to let go. So
I know you talk a lot about the kind of prepping your business for sale,
Yes.
right? And you want to start as early as possible. But let's say you're a business owner, you're an MSP business owner, and you're thinking, you know what, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think I want to start evaluating an exit at that point.
Sure.
What are some of the strategies you would suggest for those types of MSPs?
yeah, if you're looking, 3 to 5 years is like the perfect timing for it. The reason for that is whatever changes you need to make to the business, whatever targets you need to have, actually have to be woven into your financial story. And so you need to be able to see it in your book. So a lot of people are like, hey, well, I hired the salesperson and we're going to have great trajectory. Well, but if I can't see that trajectory in your historical financials, it's really hard for me as a buyer to be able to buy that. So that 3 to 5 year window is great because it allows you to take a couple years to make changes, and then actually take a couple years to be able to capture the impact of that change within your financials. As you look at doing that, I said, first thing is, what is your target? A lot of people just like, well, I hope to sell for a lot. Well, what's a lot? What's enough? And really be able to look at that. And so, when you look at a 3 to 5 year window, it's a reasonable expectation for you to double the value of your business during that time frame, right? From an organic perspective. And so, first of all, know your number, know what it is that you need to get out of the business. And then I think really whether it's us or whether it's you at PAX-A, there's a lot of great resources along the way to help coach in what does that need to look like. But look at it from a financial efficiency, a financial healthy perspective, really getting ahead of the game, making sure you understand your working capital, making sure that you're not leaving too much cash in the business, right. Making sure that you understand how deferred revenue, and I would just say that the cleaner you are financially, just the easier it is for a buyer to be able to understand, hey, how you're making money, where you're making money. So having good, we call it gap aligned kind of financials is really helpful. From there, just really documenting your processes so that somebody can come in and kind of get, hey, here's the ABC Corp's way of doing things, that
Right.
everybody's kind of pulling on the oranges in the same way, and then really getting ideally to a good growth engine. That's probably the thing. It's easier to take an MSP and make it profitable than it is to take an MSP and make it grow.
Sure.
And so if you've got 3 to 5 years kind of a timeline, you really have this good opportunity to invest in sales, build out a good sales engine, kind of a playbook, get your marketing together to be able to drive growth. That growth factor alone will add another 1 to 2 turns or multiples on top of what's going on. So with that 5-year window, you really have I think some really good places to get to a really healthy position. If you're, for whatever reason, that your target number is greater than what your organic growth is, hey, with 5 years, you actually have the opportunity to go, how can I layer in a transaction, smaller transaction or two, and still be able to clean it up in time to be able to sell, to be able to hit to that number.
Yeah, and in that point, they're kind of looking for like a 1 + 1 = 2.5 or 3.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So then let's take a longer term look at things, because I've also talked to a number of MSPs like, I don't want to sell anytime soon. It's not 10, not for 10 or even maybe even longer years, or I have no plans to sell. Of course, at some point a transaction is going to happen. But what would you recommend the MSPs that are way further away from that 3 to 5 year mark? Let's just say it's 10 or maybe 10 plus years. Like, what would you expect them to, or recommend for them to do?
Yeah, when you start looking at that 10-year time frame, truly, you should be able with it. So your least risky opportunity for creating value is going to be organic growth. And so really building out a good organic growth engine with a 10-year time horizon. I mean, you're looking at, you have the capability of quadrupling the value of your current business today within that 10-year horizon. So I would say the biggest thing in that 10-year horizon is be diligent all the way through it. It's pretty easy to go, hey, I got a comfortable lifestyle going and cash is good, and really kind of take the foot off the growth pedal and just kind of ride the organization. And one of the mistakes, that's just a mistake a lot of people with a longer vision do. They just kind of get lax on really operating the business. So it really takes good discipline to be able to do that, implementing EOS or some sort of business transformation methodology, really building out with a 10-year time horizon. You really have this opportunity to build out a great leadership team that's going to be able to carry the weight of the business, enables you to be able to become less engaged in the business, or the business to have less dependencies on you. Because you got a team that's able to drive that. You really do have plenty of time to build out a good sales and marketing organization. You do have plenty of time now to do an acquisition or two to be able to accelerate that. And coming back to that acquisition side of it, you leave about 50% of your growth on the table by not having an acquisitive strategy. So when you think about getting to a target, if I can organically grow and quadruple the value of my business in over the next 10 years, I can probably 6 or 7 times the value of my business if I layer in an acquisition or two.
Okay.
So it really gets down to how much risk you want to take on. I would say transactions create a lot of chaos and a lot of activity in the business. It's a real big distraction. So a lot of people don't want to do that, and I totally get that. But you do have this opportunity with a longer time horizon to get to a place where you can really get to like a critical mass and really look to really attractive exit. And so when I talk about critical mass, it's getting over that $1 million in EBITDA kind of number.
Okay.
But as you can get to like $2 million, the multiples just really move up pretty dramatically. Once you get past $1 million in EBITDA. And the big reason for that is just private equity is able to step in. They offer better cash, or more cash, and then you have the rollover equity opportunity. And that rollover equity is typically going to be 3 times, will triple whatever you roll. So if you have $1 million in EBITDA and you sell for $7 million, you might get 5 in cash and $2 million in rollover equity. That rollover equity in 3 to 5 years is probably going to be worth somewhere around another $6 million, right? And so you have this opportunity to be able to transact at a fair market, but then really have a really nice second bite of the apple, which again, you can roll part of that into the next PE transaction, because PE sells to PE, which eventually will sell to the public at some point. But there's a lot of opportunity financially to be made along that line.
One extra kind of question that I want to lay in there, because if you say that, of course, let's say 10 years, you want to layer in an acquisition or two, what size of acquisition should they be targeting? Should they be targeting like X% of their current size? Like, because I've seen a lot that will try to buy a similar size company, and that has
Right.
some challenges. Or they buy these tiny ones that doesn't really do much for them because they
Right.
acquire like 3-4 clients maybe out of the deal
Right.
at the end of the day. So kind of what's that sweet spot?
Sure. Yeah, really good question. A lot of people feel like, hey, it's less risk to buy the smaller company. The reality is it's way more risky to buy the smaller company. So buying because it has everything to do with predictability, right?
Sure.
So buying a $1.5 million firm as an example is really high risk. There's so much immaturity within the organization. It really is probably more of, kind of like flipping a house. There's just a lot of work that's got to roll into it. So the larger the firm you get, the more predictable the business becomes. There's more people involved. It's less dependent upon owners. There's more processes in place. And so it's more expensive, but it's way less riskier.
Sure.
And we can quantify that risk. So to the large extent, you want to buy as large as you can afford.
Sure.
But I would say as a general rule of thumb, buying somebody half your size is really it's kind of the rule of thumb, 50% your size. Predominantly not because you can't afford more, but because when you look at integration, the closer you are to being the same size, then it becomes, well, we do it our way over here better than you do it your
Right.
way over there, right? And so it's really nice to be able to say, hey, no, we have across the board higher level of operational maturity, better established processes, more consistent ways of delivering. Therefore, here's the playbook, Mr. Seller, that we now acquired on how to do business. And so it really streamlines that chain of command and really sets a clear tone, really kind of about who's in charge. Not
Sure.
that you want to be heavy-handed with that, but you don't want to have this perpetual debate about, hey, which tool is better and why am I doing it your way? I like the way we used to do it before. It's like, no, we're 2 operational maturity levels higher than you. This is
Right.
the way it's going to be.
Yeah, it seems like that's the negotiations have only begun once you get through the due diligence and all that stuff, and then you're going to integration when you have a similar size, because then you're negotiating every single
Yeah.
point along the way because they're much closer to your size. It's just a challenge, and I've seen that firsthand. So.
Yes.
So yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. So, well, I really love having you here. I love chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your services, how we can find you, how we can get in touch, and I'll throw all the links and stuff
Sure.
in the description of the video. But tell me a little bit about your business and how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so in short, we do what's in our name. We do a lot of valuation work. So we do a couple hundred valuations a year. We do have valuation as a service. So that's an annual valuation plus 3 quarterly updates, and this kind of tracking 26 different drivers of value. So you can go, hey, this quarter I can work on these 3 elements that'll really help transform the value of my business. As you go through that, and we sit down with you on a quarterly basis and review those with you. We also do mergers, where we see that a lot within peer groups, where, hey, there's companies that have a short time horizon. It's like, hey, I've got 3 years to get to my exit, and I've got a long way to get there. The reality is, if 3 companies come together, we can typically see somewhere between a 30 and 60% increase in shareholder value, and that's a lot of it that is trying to get to that critical mass level.
Sure.
And then we'll do 10 to 14 transactions per year, both buy side and sell side, depending what you're looking to do. So happy to engage and have the conversation. Whether our commitment really to the markets, we're here to help you get to those exits and get to those numbers. I think what drove me in the beginning was, hey, I was doing transactions, but in the end, I was paid to get deals done, not paid to do good deals, right?
Right.
And I really came out of that when we launched IT Valuations. Like, look, I want to make sure that we're honoring those people that really have spent 30 years building their business. They need to get to an exit. I don't want them to get taken advantage of. At the same time, on the buy side, it's like, man, we want to help you get to that exit, in a fair and equitable way. And so when we look at particularly the transaction side, we really want to count transactions as 1 year later, both parties are happy they did the deal.
Sure.
Not just, hey, we got the deal done for you.
Right.
Because in the end, M&A is really kind of either it's win-win or it's a lose-lose. There just isn't this middle ground. If it's not a good thing for both parties, then neither party should do it.
All right. Very good. Well, it was great talking to you, sir.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks so
you being
much.
here.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, cool.
Excellent.